The restaurant was warm, bright, and just expensive enough to make me nervous. Not the kind of place where billionaires dined, but the kind where you check the prices twice before ordering dessert. Linen napkins, low music, soft yellow light reflecting off the windows of the Upper West Side, where Manhattan looked gentler than it really was. I sat across from my son, Noah, watching him swing his legs under the table, humming to himself while studying the menu like it held secrets of the universe. "Mom," he said seriously, "can I get the pasta and the lemonade?" I smiled, even though my chest felt tight. "Tonight's a special night. You can choose." That was the point of this dinner, a small celebration, a fragile one. I had just finished a 12-hour shift coordinating an event I barely got paid for, but I wanted Noah to remember something else. Not courtrooms, not arguments, not the nights I cried quietly in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear. Just this, just us. I set my phone face down on the table, ignoring the faint vibration of another notification I didn't have the energy to read. Outside, traffic moved like a distant river. Inside, I let myself believe, just for 1 hour, that my life wasn't defined by what I'd lost. Then the front door opened. I didn't look up at first. I heard laughter instead. Confident, male, familiar in a way that made my spine stiffen before my brain could catch up. The air changed. When I finally raised my eyes, my stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. Richard Hale stood near the entrance, perfectly tailored suit, effortless posture, the same expression he used to wear when he wanted a room to bend toward him. His hand rested lightly on the lower back of a woman beside him, young, polished, smiling like she already knew she'd won something. Sloane Whitaker, my ex-husband and his new girlfriend. Of all the restaurants in Manhattan, of all the nights. Richard's gaze swept the room, casual and assessing, until it landed on me. He paused, just a fraction of a second, long enough for recognition, long enough for calculation. Then his lips curved into that smile, the one that used to convince investors, judges, and strangers that he was a good man. He started walking toward our table. My body reacted before my mind did. My fingers tightened around my water glass. My heart began to pound loud enough that I wondered if Noah could hear it. I told myself, "Stay calm. Don't make this a scene, not in front of your child." Richard stopped a few feet away. "Elena," he said smoothly, "what a coincidence." Sloane looked at me like she was curious, like I was a story she'd already heard but never expected to meet in person. Before I could answer, before I could stand or shield him or say anything at all, Noah looked up. He stared at Richard, then at Sloane. His small face went still, and in a clear, innocent voice that cut through the restaurant like breaking glass, my son said, "Mom, that's the woman Dad was with when you were crying." The room went silent. And in that silence, I knew. This night was about to destroy every lie Richard had built his new life on. For a moment, no one moved. No clinking glasses, no polite laughter. Even the music seemed to fade into something distant and unreal. Richard's smile froze on his face, stiff and unfinished, like a mask that had cracked but not yet fallen. His eyes flicked to Noah, then back to me, sharp and warning. Sloane's expression shifted more slowly. First surprise, then confusion, then something colder, calculation. She straightened her shoulders, her manicured hand tightening around the strap of her designer purse, as if posture alone could protect her. "That's not appropriate," Richard said finally, his voice low but controlled, too controlled. "He's confused." Noah frowned. "I'm not confused." My heart slammed against my ribs. I could feel every pair of eyes around us now, other diners pretending not to stare, waiters pausing mid-step, curiosity thick in the air. I swallowed and placed my hand over Noah's. His fingers were warm, steady. "Richard," I said quietly, "this isn't the place." He ignored me. Instead, he crouched slightly so he was closer to Noah's level, a move that once would have fooled anyone into thinking he was a devoted father. "Buddy," he said, softening his tone, "sometimes adults misunderstand things. Your mom's been under a lot of stress." There it was, the familiar strategy. Turn me into the problem, turn truth into instability. Sloane smiled then, a gentle curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Kids say things," she added lightly. "They imagine stories." I felt something inside me fracture. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, dangerous way. Noah looked at her. Really looked at her. "You were in the car," he said. "Dad told me not to tell Mom because it would make her sad." A sharp inhale rippled through the table behind us. Richard's jaw tightened. "That's enough." He stood up straight and looked at me, his voice dropping into something meant only for my ears. "You need to control him." I met his gaze, my pulse roaring. "Don't speak to my child like he's a mistake." His eyes flashed. Sloane shifted closer to him, slipping her arm through his as if claiming territory. "This is awkward," she said, glancing around. "Maybe we should all calm down before things get embarrassing." Embarrassing? I almost laughed, because what she really meant was inconvenient. Richard leaned in, his breath brushing my ear. "We'll talk later," he murmured. "Privately. You don't want to do this here." I pulled back. "I didn't do anything." Noah squeezed my hand harder. I could feel the tremor now, the delayed fear catching up to him. "I just told the truth," he whispered. That was when I realized something terrifying and clarifying all at once. Richard hadn't walked into this restaurant by accident. This wasn't bad luck. This was control. He wanted to be seen. He wanted me small. He wanted my silence, reinforced by witnesses. I reached for my wallet, my hands steady despite everything shaking inside me. "We're leaving," I said, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. Richard scoffed. "Running away again?" I stood. Noah stood with me. And as we turned toward the door, I heard Sloane whisper, just loud enough to cut deep. She should have stayed quiet. She was wrong. And soon, all of them would know it. The cold night air hit us the moment we stepped outside, sharp and unforgiving. Noah clutched my hand like he was afraid I might disappear if he loosened his grip. I could feel his small fingers trembling now, the bravery finally cracking under the weight of what he'd just done. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly. "I didn't mean to make trouble." That sentence broke something in me. I knelt right there on the sidewalk, ignoring the curious glances from people passing by, ignoring the glow of the restaurant windows behind us where Richard still stood in comfort and control. "You didn't make trouble," I said, cupping Noah's face in my hands. "You told the truth, and that is never wrong." He searched my eyes, needing certainty. I gave it to him, even though mine were burning. Behind us, the door opened. I didn't turn around, but I heard Richard's voice, irritated now, stripped of its polished charm. "Elena, don't be dramatic." I stood slowly, keeping my body between him and my son. "You embarrassed yourself," he continued. "You could have handled this like an adult." I laughed then, a short, hollow sound that surprised even me. "An adult?" I asked. "You mean like lying to your child and asking him to keep secrets from his mother?" Sloane stepped outside, too, heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks. She crossed her arms, studying me with a look that wasn't pity, but satisfaction. "Look at you," she said quietly. "You're clearly still emotional. Maybe this is why things didn't work out." There it was. The story they told themselves. I was unstable. I was bitter. I was the past that needed to stay quiet. Richard exhaled sharply. "Get him home," he said, nodding toward Noah. "We'll talk about custody tomorrow." My stomach dropped. Custody. The word landed like a threat because it was one. Richard had always known where to aim. He straightened his jacket, already slipping back into the role of composed father and successful partner. As if on cue, his phone rang. He glanced at it and smirked. "We're late," he said to Sloane. "Let's go." And just like that, they walked past us. No apology, no hesitation. Noah watched them disappear down the sidewalk, his face pale under the streetlights. "Is Dad mad at me?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "No, he's mad because he got caught." That answer seemed to settle something in him. On the ride home, the city blurred past the taxi windows. Noah leaned against my side, exhausted, silent. I stared straight ahead, replaying every second of the night, the looks, the whispers, the way Richard had spoken like I was something inconvenient that refused to stay buried. By the time we reached our apartment, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Messages from Richard. "You crossed a line. We need to talk. This won't look good for you." I didn't reply. After Noah fell asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. I opened my laptop with shaking hands, not to cry, not to plead, but to document. Dates, messages, missed payments, everything I'd been too tired, too scared, or too hopeful to record before. Tonight wasn't just humiliation, it was a warning. And for the first time since my divorce, I understood something with terrifying clarity. Richard didn't expect me to fight back, and that was about to be his biggest mistake. Gain, pulling him into my arms, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo like it was the only thing anchoring me to the world. "Some adults don't like the truth," I said carefully. "That's not your fault." He nodded, though I wasn't sure he fully understood. After I tucked him into bed, read the same dog-eared book we'd read 100 times before, and waited until his breathing evened out, I finally allowed myself to sit alone in the dark living room. My phone buzzed. One message, then another, then 5 more. "Richard, you embarrassed me tonight. You had no right to let him say those things. If you think a judge will look kindly on that behavior, you're mistaken." I stared at the screen, my chest tight, my pulse loud in my ears. This was the real Richard. Not the charming investor. Not the devoted father. The man who believed fear was leverage. I opened my laptop and logged into the email account I rarely checked anymore, the one we'd shared once. Back when I thought transparency meant safety. Old notifications surfaced like ghosts. Calendar invites marked late meeting. Expense receipts from places I'd never been. Dates that overlapped with nights he'd sworn he was working. My stomach twisted. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't exaggerated. I hadn't been too emotional. I'd been lied to. A sudden knock on the door made me jump. I froze, every muscle tense. Another knock followed, louder. "Elena!" Richard's voice called through the door, calm, controlled, dangerous. I didn't move. "Open the door," he said. "We need to settle this before you make things worse." I glanced down the hallway toward Noah's room, my heart racing. "I'm not discussing anything tonight," I called back, forcing my voice steady. "Leave." Silence. Then, softer, almost reasonable. "Don't do this. You're hurting him." That was the line that almost broke me. But then I remembered Noah's voice at the restaurant. Clear, honest, brave. I straightened. "Leave," I repeated, "or I'll call the police." Another pause, then footsteps retreating. When the building finally went quiet again, I sank onto the couch, exhausted, shaken, but no longer unsure. Tonight wasn't just humiliation. It was proof. And as I closed my laptop, one thought settled into my bones with terrifying clarity. If Richard wanted a war, He had just given me the reason to fight. Morning came too fast. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of shallow half-dreams where Richard's voice echoed in my head, sharp and precise, always circling back to the same word, custody. I made breakfast on autopilot, toast, scrambled eggs. Noah sat at the counter, quieter than usual, swinging his legs like he was afraid to take up too much space. "Mom," he asked carefully, "is Dad still mad?" I took a breath before answering. "Your dad is responsible for his feelings," I said. "Not you." He nodded, absorbing that the way kids do, slowly, seriously. When I dropped him off at school, he hugged me tighter than normal. I watched him disappear through the doors, my chest aching with a fear I refused to name. Then my phone rang. Richard. I didn't answer. The text came seconds later. "We need to meet today. This situation is getting out of hand." I stared at the screen, my hands cold. For years, those words had worked on me. They'd made me apologize, retreat, compromise. Today, they only made something inside me harden. I opened my laptop. For the first time, I didn't just skim old emails or glance at missed payment notices. I dug in. Bank statements, shared cloud storage, archived messages I'd been too afraid to read before. Patterns emerged, quiet, damning ones. Late-night meetings that lined up perfectly with credit card charges at hotels. Transfers that made his income look smaller than it was. Months where child support arrived late, or not at all, followed by photos online of luxury weekends I couldn't afford to dream about. My stomach churned. This wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. Another message buzzed in. "If you keep pushing this narrative, I'll have to protect my rights as a father." Protect. I laughed out loud, once, sharp and bitter. At noon, I met with a legal aid attorney I'd been referred to months ago, but never had the courage to call back. Her office was small, functional, nothing like the glossy conference rooms Richard loved. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't rush. When I finished, she folded her hands and said, "You're not crazy, and you're not powerless, but you are behind." That hurt, but it was honest. "He's been controlling the timeline," she continued, "you reacting instead of documenting." I nodded slowly. She slid a yellow legal pad toward me. "We start today. Every message, every threat, every missed payment, no emotional responses, just facts." As if summoned by the universe, my phone lit up again. "Richard, last chance to handle this privately." I showed her the screen. Her jaw tightened. "Good," she said. "That helps." I left the office feeling heavier, but clearer. That afternoon, as I sat in my car outside Noah's school, another name flashed across my phone. Daniel Ross. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He'd been a client back when my career still existed, back when people returned my calls. The message was short. "I saw you last night. If you need help, not favors, call me." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. For the first time since the restaurant, I didn't feel hunted. I felt seen. And as Noah ran toward me, smiling like the world hadn't cracked open beneath our feet, I made a decision. I was done surviving quietly. From now on, everything would be on record. The envelope was waiting for me when I got home. White. Thick. My name typed neatly on the front like it was just another piece of mail, not a warning shot aimed at my life. I stood in the hallway for a long moment before opening it, my coat still on, my keys cold in my hand. I already knew who it was from. Richard Hale, through counsel. My stomach twisted as I slid the papers out. Legal language, cold, precise, and ruthless. A formal notice stating his intent to revisit custody due to recent instability and inappropriate behavior witnessed by a minor. I laughed, but the sound came out thin. Inappropriate behavior. That's what my child telling the truth had become. I sat at the kitchen table. the same spot where I'd cried quietly just days before, and read every word carefully. Richard wasn't just threatening anymore. He was moving. He was building a case, his case, painting himself as the calm, responsible parent and me as the emotional risk. My phone buzzed almost on cue. Richard, you forced my hand. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up the phone and called the number on the card the legal aid attorney had given me. This time, I didn't hesitate. This time, I wasn't asking if I deserved help. I was asking how to fight. The meeting was brief and brutal. The attorney didn't sugarcoat anything. He has money, he has time, and he has already started, she said. Judges don't like surprises, and he's setting you up to look like one. I swallowed. What do I do? You stop reacting, she said, and you start controlling the narrative. That night, Richard crossed another line. He showed up at Noah's school. I found out because the principal called me directly, her voice tight with concern. Richard had come to check in, she said, asking questions about Noah's behavior, implying I'd been under stress, that the home environment might be tense. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. He was planting seeds. When I picked Noah up, he looked confused, unsettled. Dad asked me if you cry a lot, he said quietly. I didn't know what to say. That was it. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with finality. I knelt in front of him, holding his shoulders. Listen to me, I said gently. If anyone ever asks you questions about me that make you uncomfortable, you tell me. Always. He nodded. That night, I finally returned Daniel Ross's message. We met in a quiet cafe the next afternoon. No dramatics, no promises. He listened the way powerful people do when they're deciding something. He's escalating, Daniel said after I finished. That means he's nervous. I shook my head. He doesn't look nervous. Daniel gave a small, knowing smile. Men like him never do, until they lose control. He didn't offer to save me. He offered something better, perspective. Document everything, he said, and don't underestimate how much damage arrogance can do to a man who thinks he's untouchable. As I walked back to my car, phone buzzing again with another message from Richard, I realized the truth. This was no longer about dinner. This was about erasing me, and I was done letting him try. The cafe Daniel chose was nothing like the places Richard liked. No glass walls, no marble counters, no people dressed to be seen. It was quiet, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, the kind of place where conversations stayed private and no one cared who you were. Daniel was already seated when I arrived, jacket draped neatly over the chair beside him, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. He looked older than I remembered. Not tired, seasoned, calm in a way that made the world feel less loud. Elena, he said, standing briefly, thank you for coming. I sat across from him, my hands wrapped around my cup like it was something solid I could hold on to. You said you saw me the other night. He nodded. I was there with a client. I recognized you immediately. I let out a breath. I didn't see you. You wouldn't have, he said gently. You were being watched. That sentence made my skin prickle. Daniel didn't rush. He didn't interrupt when I spoke. I told him everything. The restaurant, the threats, the papers, Noah being questioned at school. I expected sympathy. What I got was something sharper. He's sloppy, Daniel said after a moment. I blinked. Richard? Yes, he said. Men like him believe pressure equals power. They escalate too fast. That creates records. I stared at him. Records don't matter if he has better lawyers. Daniel leaned back slightly. Records always matter. The question is, who knows how to read them? He reached into his bag and pulled out a slim notebook, opening it with practiced ease. Tell me, has his income changed recently? I frowned. Officially? No, But his lifestyle hasn't slowed down. Daniel smiled faintly. That's what I thought. He explained calmly, methodically, how men in Richard's position often hid money to reduce support obligations, how arrogance made them careless, how patterns always emerged if someone bothered to look. You're not asking me to help because you want revenge, he said. You're asking because you want stability. I nodded. My throat felt tight. I just want my son to be safe. Daniel closed the notebook. Then we proceed carefully. He wasn't offering money. He wasn't promising miracles. What he offered was guidance, names of forensic accountants, advice on timing, warnings about what not to do. As we stood to leave, he paused. One more thing. I looked up. Richard didn't come to that restaurant by accident, he said. He wanted a reaction. What he didn't expect was a witness. Noah, I whispered. Daniel nodded. Children tell the truth without strategy. That terrifies men who live on narratives. Outside, the city moved on like nothing had changed. People laughed, cars passed, life didn't pause for fear. But inside me, something shifted. For months, no, years, I'd felt like I was always one step behind, bracing for the next blow. Now, for the first time, I felt like someone had handed me a map. That night after Noah fell asleep, I organized my files again. This time, I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a case, and somewhere deep down, I knew it. Richard had mistaken my silence for weakness. He was about to learn the difference. Richard didn't wait long. 3 days after I met Daniel, the pressure escalated in ways that felt calculated, almost rehearsed. First, my email flooded with concerns from Richard's attorney, requests for schedules, explanations, records I had already provided. Then came the text messages, carefully worded, just polite enough to look reasonable if anyone else read them. I'm worried about Noah. This conflict isn't healthy for him. Let's resolve this without dragging him through court. The words were clean. The intent was not. I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to my attorney and added timestamps to my growing file. Each message felt like a small shove, testing how close I was to the edge. That afternoon, Noah came home quieter than usual. He dropped his backpack by the door and went straight to his room. I followed him a few minutes later and found him sitting on his bed staring at his hands. Did something happen at school? I asked gently. He hesitated, then nodded. Dad picked me up early. My heart lurched. He didn't tell me. I know, Noah said. He said it was okay. He took me for ice cream. Ice cream. The word landed wrong. He asked me questions, Noah continued, about you, about if you're sad a lot, if you get angry. My chest tightened. What did you say? I didn't know what to say, he whispered, so I said you're tired, but you always help me with homework. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tighter than I meant to. Richard had crossed another line, and this one cut deep. That night, I couldn't sit still. I paced the apartment, replaying Daniel's words in my head. Men like him escalate when they feel control slipping. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. Sloane Whitaker. The sight of her name sent a jolt through me. I stared at the screen, debating whether to ignore it. Against my better judgment, I opened the message. This doesn't have to be so hostile, she wrote. Richard is under a lot of pressure. You're making things harder than they need to be. I exhaled slowly and typed nothing. Another message followed, sent too quickly. He's trying to protect his image. You should understand that. There it was. Not concern, not empathy. Image. I forwarded the messages to my attorney and turned off my phone. For the first time, I understood something clearly. Sloane wasn't just a bystander. She was part of the machinery pushing me back into silence. The next morning, Daniel called. He picked Noah up without telling you, he said, not asking. That's a mistake. My pulse quickened. How bad? Bad enough to document, he replied. Not bad enough for him to realize it yet. That afternoon, I received an email I hadn't expected. From Sloan. An attachment. No message. Just a file. My hands trembled as I opened it. An internal email thread, half visible, names redacted poorly. Richard's name unmistakable in the middle, tied to a discussion about income adjustments and temporary reclassification. My breath caught. Sloan had made a mistake, and she had just handed me the first real crack in Richard's armor. For the first time since the restaurant, I didn't feel afraid. I felt dangerous. The next day, Richard called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice sounded different now, less smooth, more clipped. Elena, if Sloan sent you something, it was a mistake. Whatever it is, it's confidential. Delete it. Delete it. I smiled, though there was no humor in it. By afternoon, his attorney reached out, requesting an informal conversation to clarify misunderstandings. My attorney declined on my behalf. By evening, a courier delivered another envelope, an offer, revised support payments, a cleaner custody schedule, a request, politely phrased, for a non-disclosure agreement. I read it twice. Richard wasn't trying to win anymore. He was trying to contain damage. When Noah came home from school, I helped him with his math homework like nothing was wrong. He laughed when he got an answer wrong. I laughed with him, grateful for the normalcy. Later, as I tucked him into bed, he looked at me seriously. "Mom," he said, "Dad keeps asking me questions." My heart clenched. "What kind of questions?" "About if you're mad at him," Noah said, "and if I want to live with him more." I took a steadying breath. "And what do you think?" Noah shrugged. "I like it here. It's quiet. You listen." That night, I sat alone at the table again, the same place where fear used to live. I looked at Richard's offer, then at the email thread, then at the growing file on my computer. For the first time, the balance had shifted, not because I had power, but because Richard had made a mistake and I hadn't rushed to exploit it. I forwarded one final message to my attorney. Proceed. No NDA. Then I turned off my phone. Because tomorrow, Richard would realize something terrifying. He wasn't controlling the timeline anymore. I was. The offer sat on my kitchen table like a trap, printed on expensive paper, clean margins, polite language, Richard's version of generosity, measured, strategic, and designed to look reasonable to anyone who didn't know him. I read it again at 2 in the morning, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Increased child support, fewer court dates, mutual respect, all in exchange for one thing, silence. An NDA that would keep my mouth shut about everything I knew, everything Noah had seen, everything Richard had carefully buried. My hands trembled as I set the papers down. For the first time since the restaurant, doubt crept in. This deal would make life easier. No more fear every time the phone rang. No more legal fees stacking up like unpaid debts. Noah would be protected from the courtroom, from hearings where adults dissected his life like a case file. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Was peace worth swallowing the truth? My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "This is me being fair. Don't mistake that." Fair. I laughed quietly, pressing my fingers to my lips so the sound wouldn't echo down the hall to Noah's room. Fair was never his goal. Control was. Still, the fear was real. I pictured worst-case scenarios. The judge siding with him, my savings disappearing, Noah caught between parents who couldn't stop fighting. The weight of it all pressed down on my chest until breathing felt like work. I stood and walked into Noah's room. He was asleep, one arm flung over his pillow. His face relaxed in a way that reminded me why I kept going. I sat on the edge of his bed and brushed his hair back gently. "What would you do?" I whispered, knowing he couldn't answer. But my phone buzzed again. "Daniel." "Don't decide tonight," his message read. Fear makes people rush. Richard is counting on that. I stared at the screen, then typed back with shaking fingers. What if I can't win? The reply came slower this time. Then you still teach your son that truth matters more than comfort. I swallowed hard. The next morning, I took Noah to school and sat in my car afterward, staring at the building as parents came and went. I thought about the example I was setting, not with words, but with choices. At noon, I met my attorney. She didn't push. She didn't judge. She simply laid out the reality. Richard's offer was tempting because it was designed to be, but it came with a cost that couldn't be measured in dollars. Once you sign this, she said quietly, you lose leverage forever. I nodded. That afternoon, I picked Noah up early and took him to the park. We sat on a bench watching pigeons scatter every time a dog ran past. Mom, he said suddenly, are you scared? I hesitated, then told the truth. Yes. He nodded like that made sense. It's okay, he said. You're brave even when you're scared. Something in my chest cracked open. That night I went home, opened my laptop, and deleted Richard's offer from my email. Then I forwarded one final message to my attorney. We proceed. No agreement, no silence. I shut the computer and felt it settle, fear still there, but no longer in charge. Because the truth was simple. If I took his deal, Richard would win quietly. If I refused, he would fight. And this time I was ready. The shift was subtle, but once it happened, I could feel it everywhere. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. That realization came to me on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting across from Daniel in his office. A quiet floor high above the street. Not flashy, not intimidating. Just clean lines, soft light, and a long table where people made decisions without raising their voices. You're past the emotional phase, Daniel said, glancing at the notes I'd organized. That's usually when the other side makes mistakes. I frowned. He's already dangerous. Yes, Daniel agreed calmly. But now he's predictable. He slid a folder toward me. Inside wasn't explosive evidence or dramatic revelations, just timelines. Dates, patterns, overlapping events that told a story without adjectives. This, he said, tapping the page, is what judges understand. We walked through it piece by piece. The delayed support payments that coincided with his luxury travel. The sudden reclassification of income right before mediation deadlines. The escalation after the restaurant incident. Arrogance creates rhythm, Daniel said, and rhythm is easy to follow. That night, I got another message from Richard. You're making this unnecessarily difficult. I stared at the words for a long time before forwarding them to my attorney and archiving the thread. No response, no emotion. The silence unsettled him more than any argument ever had. The next move came faster than I expected. The school called again, not with concern this time, but confusion. Richard had requested copies of Noah's attendance records and teacher notes without including me. He seemed insistent, the secretary said carefully. I thanked her and hung up, my hands steady, documented. By the end of the week, my attorney filed a formal motion addressing Richard's interference and submitted preliminary financial discrepancies. Nothing flashy, just facts. That was when Sloan reached out again. This time, the message wasn't polished. Richard is spiraling, she wrote. He thinks you're trying to ruin him. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Instead of replying, I handed my phone to Daniel during our next call. She's afraid, he said after reading it, which means he's losing control at home, too. What happens now? I asked. Daniel paused. Now we wait for him to overplay his hand. The waiting was the hardest part. Every ring of the phone made my heart jump. Every unknown number sent a spike of anxiety through me. But each day I didn't react, something strange happened. I slept better. I laughed more with Noah. I felt stronger. One evening, as I helped Noah with a school project, he looked up at me and asked, "Are you still scared, Mom?" I thought about it. "A little," I admitted, "but not like before." He smiled. "That's good." Later that night, my attorney called. "Richard's team just requested an emergency meeting," she said. "They're claiming urgency." I closed my eyes, breathing in slowly. Urgency meant panic. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. Men like him always reveal themselves when they feel cornered. I agreed to the meeting, with conditions. Everything documented, no private discussions, no rushed decisions. When I hung up, I looked around my small apartment. The same walls that once felt like they were closing in on me. Now they felt solid. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was waiting for the moment the truth would catch up to him. And I knew it was coming. The emergency meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Richard's attorneys insisted on speed, on urgency, on resolving misunderstandings before they escalated further. The word urgency appeared 3 times in the email, bolded once, underlined twice. Daniel called me the night before. "That's not confidence," he said. "That's fear wearing a suit." I slept surprisingly well. The conference room was neutral and windowless, designed to drain emotion from the air. Richard sat at the far end of the table, posture perfect, expression carefully blank. His attorney spoke first, voice smooth, rehearsed. "This situation has become unnecessarily adversarial," she said. "Our client believes cooperation is in everyone's best interest." Richard nodded, folding his hands like a man who still believed he was in control. My attorney didn't respond immediately. She slid a single document across the table instead. "Before we discuss cooperation," she said, "we'd like clarification." Richard glanced down, frowning slightly. It was a timeline, not long, not dramatic, just dates, payments, and corresponding financial records. Missed support lined up neatly with deferred compensation entries. Travel expenses overlapped with days he claimed financial hardship. Silence stretched. "That's selective data," Richard said finally, his tone tight. "Out of context." My attorney nodded. "Then context will help." She placed a second document down. Then a third. Each one added weight. Each one removed space for denial. Richard's attorney shifted in her seat. I watched Richard closely then, not as my ex-husband, not as Noah's father, but as a man realizing the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. "You didn't disclose these adjustments," my attorney continued calmly. "Not during mediation, not during support review." "They're temporary," Richard snapped. "Perfectly legal." Daniel, who had joined the meeting quietly, finally spoke. "Temporary reclassification is legal," he said evenly. "If disclosed, if not used to reduce obligations, if not repeated in pattern." Richard turned toward him sharply. "And you are?" "Someone who reads patterns for a living," Daniel replied. The air shifted. Richard leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what is this?" he demanded. "An ambush?" "No," my attorney said. "It's documentation." His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering something urgent. Richard waved her off, irritation flashing across his face. "This is about dinner," he said suddenly, pointing at me. "This all started because she made a scene in public." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because my attorney slid the final page forward. A summary. Richard's income as reported versus lifestyle indicators. Conservative, careful, enough to justify a formal forensic review. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. "That won't go anywhere," he said, but the certainty was gone. My attorney met his gaze. "It already has." The meeting ended quickly after that. No agreement, no smiles, just stiff handshakes and tension so thick it clung to my skin as I stood. Outside the building, my phone buzzed. A message from Sloan. He didn't tell me it was this bad. I didn't answer. As I walked to my car, the city looked the same. But I wasn't. Richard had wanted urgency. He'd gotten it. Because now, the truth wasn't just mine anymore. It was on record. And from this moment on, everything would move in a direction he could no longer control. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of cold that came from polished wood, neutral walls, and people trained to observe without reacting. I sat beside my attorney, hands folded tightly in my lap, reminding myself to breathe. Across the aisle, Richard looked composed, confident. His suit was impeccable, his posture relaxed, as if this were just another meeting he planned to dominate. Sloane sat behind him, her expression carefully blank, eyes darting whenever someone glanced her way. I didn't look at them for long. The judge entered, and the room shifted into order. Formalities followed, names, motions, acknowledgments. My heart pounded, but I stayed still. Richard's attorney spoke first. She painted a clean picture, a concerned father, a volatile ex-wife, a child caught in emotional crossfire. She referenced the restaurant incident again, framing it as proof of my instability. I felt heat rise in my chest, but I didn't react. When it was our turn, my attorney stood calmly. "This case," she began, "is not about emotion. It's about patterns." She laid out the timeline methodically. No accusations, no dramatic pauses, just facts, missed payments, delayed disclosures, requests made without consent, each point anchored to a date, a document, a record. Richard shifted in his seat. Then came the question that changed everything. "Mr. Hale," the judge said, peering over her glasses, "can you explain the discrepancies between your reported income and documented expenditures?" Richard smiled faintly. "Of course. My compensation structure is complex." The judge nodded. "Then complexity should not prevent transparency. My attorney requested the court approve a formal forensic review." Richard's attorney objected immediately, voice sharp. "There's no basis for—" The judge raised a hand. "Given the documentation presented, there is." The room went quiet. I saw it then, the flicker of something in Richard's eyes. Fear. Not the loud kind. The controlled kind that comes when a man realizes charm won't save him. Sloane leaned forward, whispering something urgently. Richard didn't look at her. The judge continued. "Until this review is completed, custody and support arrangements will remain unchanged." Relief washed through me so suddenly I had to grip the table. Not victory, but safety. As the hearing adjourned, Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. He looked at me then, not with anger but disbelief, as if he couldn't understand how this had happened. Outside the courtroom, reporters weren't waiting. There were no flashing cameras, just the quiet hum of a building moving on to its next case. Sloane caught up to me in the hallway. "You don't understand what you've done," she said, her voice low and shaking. "This could ruin him." I met her gaze steadily. "He did this to himself." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, because for the first time, there was nothing left to say. I walked away without looking back. Later that evening, as I tucked Noah into bed, he asked, "Did Dad win today?" I kissed his forehead. "No," I said softly, "but neither did I." He frowned. "Then what happened?" I smiled, brushing his hair back gently. "The truth showed up," I said. "And sometimes, that's enough." Richard didn't contact me for 3 days. That silence was louder than any threat. When he finally did, it wasn't directly. It came through his attorney. Another offer, revised again. Higher support, more flexibility, still the same condition, confidentiality. My attorney called me immediately. "They're pushing harder. That tells me the review isn't going well." I stared out the window at the city below, the afternoon sun cutting between buildings. "And if I still say no?" She didn't hesitate. Then it continues. That night, Noah noticed my distraction. "Are you thinking about Dad?" he asked, lying on the floor coloring. "Yes," I admitted, "but not in the way you think." He looked up at me seriously. "Is he in trouble?" I chose my words carefully. "He's being asked to explain some choices." Noah considered that. "Like when I have to explain why I didn't do my homework." Despite myself, I smiled. Something like that. The next twist came sooner than expected. Sloane showed up at my door, unannounced, uninvited. I opened it just enough to see her face, pale, tense, nothing like the confident woman from the restaurant. "He lied to me," she said without preamble. I didn't respond. "He told me you were unstable, that this was about revenge," she continued, voice cracking. "But I saw the documents. I saw what they're asking for now." I folded my arms. "Why are you here?" She swallowed. "Because I don't want to be dragged down with him." There it was. Fear. Finally honest. "I can't help you," I said calmly. "And I won't protect him." Her shoulders sagged. For the first time, she looked young, small. As she walked away, I felt no triumph. Only clarity. Richard had built his life on control, of narratives, of people, of silence. And now, that control was unraveling. Not because I attacked him, but because I stopped protecting his lies. Richard's downfall didn't look the way movies promised. There were no headlines, no flashing cameras, no dramatic arrest. It happened quietly, in offices with frosted glass and closed doors, where voices stayed low and decisions were final. Daniel called me on a Thursday afternoon. "They've opened an internal compliance review," he said. "Formal this time." I sank into the chair at my kitchen table, my legs suddenly weak. "At his firm?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "Triggered by questions from the court-appointed forensic team. They don't like overlap between personal litigation and undisclosed compensation." I pressed my fingers to my temple, breathing slowly. This was bigger than I'd imagined, and heavier, too. "What does that mean for him?" I asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. "It means he can't control the narrative anymore." That evening, Richard finally called me himself, not threatening, not charming, just tired. "Elena," he said, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. "We need to end this." I stayed silent. "They're asking for records I don't have time to pull," he continued. "This is spiraling." Spiraling. The word landed with a dull finality. "You can still stop it," he added quickly. "Sign the agreement. We both walk away intact." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I saw the man I'd once loved, the man who used to promise we were a team. Then I remembered the restaurant, Noah's voice, the way Richard had tried to erase the truth with intimidation. "No," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then anger flared. "You're doing this out of spite," he snapped. "You always needed to win." I felt something settle in my chest. "This isn't about winning," I said. "It's about accountability." He laughed bitterly. "You think the world cares?" "No," I replied. "I think the system does." He hung up. 2 days later, my attorney forwarded me a notice. Richard had been placed on temporary leave pending the outcome of the review. Temporary, the same word he'd once used to hide money. Sloane texted me that night. "They let him go today." I didn't reply. When Noah came home from school, he sensed something was different. "You look lighter," he said, dropping his backpack by the door. I smiled softly. "Maybe I am." That weekend, I took Noah to the park. We sat on a bench eating ice cream, watching families pass by. For the first time in months, I wasn't scanning the crowd, bracing for Richard's presence. "Mom," Noah said suddenly, "does Dad still get to be my dad?" The question cut deep. "Yes," I said carefully. "That doesn't change." He nodded, relieved. And in that moment, I understood something important. Richard losing power didn't mean I'd won a prize. It meant balance was being restored. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself one quiet acknowledgement. Not joy, not revenge, but release. Richard had built his life on bending rules and people. Now the rules were bending back, and for the first time, the weight wasn't on my shoulders anymore. Sloane didn't disappear quietly. At first, she tried distance. No messages, no calls, no accidental run-ins. Her social media went dark, the curated life she once displayed vanishing overnight like it had never existed. That alone told me more than words ever could. Then she called. It was late, just after 10. Noah was asleep, the apartment finally still. I watched the phone vibrate on the table, her name lighting up the screen like a ghost I hadn't invited back. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Hello? My voice was calm, detached. She exhaled sharply on the other end. I don't know who else to talk to. I closed my eyes. Richard moved out today, she said. He didn't even argue. Just packed a bag and left. I said nothing. They told him the review could take months, she continued, words tumbling out now. No access to accounts, no bonuses, no guarantees he's coming back. Her voice cracked. He blamed me. That didn't surprise me. He said if I hadn't panicked, if I hadn't sent that email. She trailed off. You made your choices, I said evenly. So did he. Silence stretched between us. I thought he loved me, she whispered. I felt no satisfaction hearing that, just distance. He loved control, I replied. That's not the same thing. She sniffed, embarrassed now. He asked me to lie, to say I misunderstood things, to help him fix this. And? I asked. I said no, she said quickly. I won't destroy myself for him. That was the first honest thing she'd said since I met her. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, not shaken, not angry, just aware. Richard wasn't just losing his career, he was losing his shield. The next development came through my attorney. Sloane had submitted a sworn statement, limited, careful, focused only on what she knew directly, not out of loyalty to me, but out of self-preservation. It was enough. Richard's attorney requested another meeting. This time there was no confidence in the wording, just containment. When Daniel called, his tone was different. He's alone now, he said. That's when men like him unravel. I thought about the years I'd spent shrinking myself to keep the peace, about how Richard had always needed someone beside him, admiring, deflecting, absorbing blame. Now there was no one left to do that work. That evening, Noah asked a question that stopped me cold. Mom, he said softly, does Dad still live with that lady? No, I answered truthfully. He nodded, relieved. I didn't like her. She looked at me like I was in the way. My throat tightened. You're never in the way, I said, pulling him into a hug. Not to me. Later that night, I received one final message from Sloane. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't reply. Some apologies aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be carried by the person who caused the harm. Richard had built his world on using people until they cracked. Now, with no one left to lean on, he was finally facing the weight of himself. And for the first time, I understood this wasn't revenge. It was consequence. The day the new custody order arrived, I didn't cry. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where fear had once lived, and read the document slowly. Joint custody, clear boundaries, fixed schedules, no surprise pickups, no unilateral decisions. Child support recalculated based on verified income with back payments mandated. It wasn't dramatic, it was fair, and fairness felt revolutionary. My attorney called an hour later. This is solid, she said. He can't move without court approval now. I closed my eyes, exhaling. Thank you. When I hung up, the apartment felt different, quieter. Not because there was less noise, but because there was less tension. I hadn't realized how much space fear had taken up until it was gone. That afternoon, I picked Noah up from school. He ran toward me, backpack bouncing, smiling the way he did when his mind was free. "Guess what?" he said. "We're doing a family tree project." I smiled. "That sounds fun." "Can I put you at the top?" he asked seriously. My throat tightened. "You can put whoever you want." At home, we worked on it together. Construction paper, markers, glue that stuck to our fingers. Noah asked questions as we went, about grandparents, about cousins, about where he fit. "You're my home base," he said casually, like it was obvious. That night, after he went to bed, I received an email from Daniel. "Everything is finalized on your end," it read. "You did well." I stared at the words for a long moment. You did well. Not you survived. Not you got lucky. You did well. The next weeks passed quietly. No threats, no urgent emails. Richard followed the schedule, stiff and distant, but compliant. When he picked Noah up, he stayed in the car. No speeches, no performances. The power dynamic had changed, and he knew it. One evening, as I was leaving the grocery store, Daniel called. "I wanted to check in," he said, "not as a strategist, as a person." I leaned against my car, the air cool against my face. "I'm okay," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "I'm glad," he replied. "You earned that." We didn't rush into anything. No dramatic declarations, no rescues, just quiet conversations that felt easy, honest. That too felt new. Weeks later, Noah looked up from his dinner and said, "Mom, you smile more now?" I paused. "Do I?" He nodded. "Yeah, you don't look like you're waiting anymore." That was when it hit me. I wasn't waiting. For permission, for forgiveness, for Richard to change. I had my career rebuilding, my home steady, my child safe. I had myself back, and that was the reward no court could grant. But every hard choice had earned. The strangest part of winning was realizing I didn't want my old life back. That truth settled slowly, in quiet moments I hadn't had space to notice before. Like the morning I woke up before my alarm, sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor, and realized my chest didn't tighten when I checked my phone. No threats, no demands, no anxiety disguised as urgency, just silence. Daniel and I met for coffee one Saturday. Nothing formal, nothing planned. We sat near the window while the city moved past us, ordinary and loud and alive. He talked about work. I talked about Noah's school project and the ridiculous amount of glue it required. At one point, he smiled and said, "You know, a lot of people would use this moment to reclaim what they lost." I knew exactly what he meant. My old career, my old circle. The version of myself that lived in conference rooms and measured her worth in approval. "I don't want it," I said simply. Daniel studied me for a second, then nodded. "Good. Then you're free." That night, Noah and I cleaned out a box I'd kept hidden in the back of my closet. Old photos, invitations, things from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Noah picked up a picture of me and Richard from years ago. "You look different," he said. "I was," I replied. He tilted his head. "I like you better now." I laughed, but my eyes burned. Richard tried once more. It came in the form of a message sent through his attorney. Carefully phrased, respectful, almost apologetic. He suggested revisiting co-parenting communication and hinted at rebuilding something amicable. I read it, then closed the email. Some doors don't need to be slammed, they just need to stay closed. Weeks passed. My work stabilized. I took on projects I enjoyed instead of ones that impressed people who didn't matter. Noah settled into a rhythm that felt safe, predictable, calm. One evening, as I tucked him in, he asked, Are we okay now? I thought about it. Yes, I said. We are. Daniel didn't push. He didn't rush. He showed up, consistently, quietly, without trying to fix me or rewrite my story. One night after Noah fell asleep, we sat on the couch, not touching, just existing in the same space. I don't need saving, I said suddenly. I know, he replied. That's why I'm here. That was the moment I understood what I was being offered. Not escape, not rescue, choice. The life ahead of me wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was mine, built with intention, not fear. Richard had lost everything he used to control me, and I had gained something far more valuable, the freedom to decide who I would become next. The proposal didn't come the way stories usually tell it. There was no restaurant, no crowd, no dramatic speech. It came on a quiet Sunday evening after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch between us, his head resting against my side, the TV still murmuring softly in the background. Daniel muted the screen. For a moment, we just watched Noah breathe, the steady rise and fall of his chest grounding the room in something real and fragile. He trusts me, Daniel said quietly. I nodded. He trusts easily, but he remembers everything. Daniel didn't smile at that. He took it seriously. So do I, he said. He turned toward me then, not nervous, not rehearsed, just honest. I don't want to step into your life and rearrange it, he said. I want to build something that fits inside it. My throat tightened. He reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, giving me time, always giving me time. The ring was simple, no spectacle, no statement meant for anyone else's approval. I know you don't need this, he said. That's why I'm asking. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who mistook pressure for love, urgency for devotion, the one who signed papers because she was afraid of losing what little stability she had. This was different. I choose this, I said finally, not because I need to, because I want to. Daniel smiled then, not triumphantly, but with relief. When Noah woke up, groggy and confused, he looked at the ring, then at us. Are you staying? He asked Daniel. Daniel met his gaze. If your mom and you want me to. Noah considered that carefully. Then he nodded. Okay. That was enough. We didn't rush the wedding. We didn't hide it either. We told Noah first. We told him nothing would change unless he was ready. We kept his routines, his space, his voice mattered. When Richard found out, he said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. The wedding was small, a courthouse ceremony followed by dinner with friends who had stood by me when I had nothing impressive to offer them. No speeches about fate, just gratitude. As I stood there holding Daniel's hand, I felt something settle deep inside me. This was the reward. Not wealth, not status, not victory over someone else, but partnership without fear, love without leverage, a home where no one had to shrink to keep the peace. Later that night, Noah crawled into bed between us, smiling sleepily. We're a family now, he said. Yes, I replied, kissing his forehead. We are. Richard had lost control, reputation, and the narrative he'd built so carefully. I had gained something quieter and infinitely stronger. A life that didn't need defending. A love that didn't ask me to disappear. And a future that finally felt earned. A year later, I brought Noah back to the same neighborhood where everything had started. Not to relive it. Not to prove anything. Just to eat dinner. The restaurant was different, smaller, quieter. But the light was warm, and the windows reflected a version of me I almost didn't recognize. Not because I looked richer or more impressive, but because my shoulders were relaxed, my breathing steady. Noah talked non-stop about school, about a science project he was convinced would change the world. Daniel listened, genuinely interested, asking questions that made Noah sit a little taller. At one point, Noah stopped mid-sentence and said, "Mom, you're smiling again." I paused, surprised. Then I laughed softly. "I guess I am." Across the city, Richard's life had grown smaller. The firm he once dominated quietly replaced him, not with scandal, just with absence. His name no longer opened doors the way it used to. Invitations slowed, calls went unanswered. He still saw Noah, still fulfilled his obligations, but the confidence was gone. Power, it turned out, didn't leave dramatically. It simply stopped working. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't need to, because my life was full in ways his never had been. At home, our evenings were simple. Homework at the kitchen table. Music playing softly. Daniel cooking while Noah critiqued like a tiny judge. Laughter that didn't come with tension attached. One night, as I tucked Noah into bed, he asked, "Do you think Dad knows why everything changed?" I considered the question carefully. "I think," I said, "he knows he can't control us anymore." Noah nodded, satisfied. "Good." Later, sitting on the couch beside Daniel, I thought about the woman I had been at the beginning of this story, the one who measured survival in silence, who mistook endurance for strength. I had been wrong. Strength was telling the truth when it was inconvenient. Strength was choosing peace over pride. Strength was refusing to shrink, even when shrinking felt safer. Daniel took my hand. "You okay?" I smiled. Better than okay. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent, relentless, alive. Inside our home, there was warmth, stability, the quiet certainty that nothing here was built on fear. Richard had lost the game he never realized he was playing, not because I outsmarted him, but because I stopped participating. I raised my glass of water, the simplest toast imaginable. "To peace," I said. Daniel echoed it. Noah lifted his juice box solemnly. "To truth," he added. I laughed, my heart full, and in that moment I understood something I wished I'd known sooner. Happy endings aren't loud. They don't demand applause. They arrive quietly when you finally choose yourself, and that choice changes everything. So, the story has come to an end. And if you're still here with us right now, truly still here, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a quiet way. Maybe it wasn't the drama. Maybe it was the silence between the fights, the moment someone chose truth over comfort, or the realization that peace doesn't come from winning, it comes from stopping the war inside you. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what this story was really about. Not revenge, not punishment, but the courage to reclaim your inner ground when everything else feels out of control. Life doesn't always reward us with applause. Sometimes it rewards us with clarity, with boundaries, with the quiet relief of no longer living in fear. And that kind of healing is real. It's practical. It's something you can carry into your own life, today. If this story made you pause, if it reflected something you're going through, then maybe it's reminding you that choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. We're here to tell stories that don't just entertain, but help us heal together.